Have you ever written a Nightwatch test that runs fine most of the time but randomly fails on the next run? You check the locators, you added few pause functions, and then somehow it started working again. If that sounds familiar, then this video is exactly for you. In this session, we are going to talk about async await in NightwatchJS, why it matters, how it works under the hood, and how to use it in a reliable, modern way to make the end-to-end test clean. And yes, as usual, we're going to use the same e-commerce playground from Lambda test so that you can start using all the tests we'll be doing right after watching this video. Just to call it out again, I'll be explaining every step in detail so that you don't miss anything. If you find the pace a bit slow, feel free to increase the playback speed to 1.5x if you want to go faster. Let's start our discussion with the topic why async await matters. NightwatchJS internally runs asynchronous commands. Every time there is a dot click, dot set value, dot assert, etc. we run, right? Whenever we call, it runs that internally. Before the version 2.x, Nightwatch used callbacks to manage the asynchronous behavior. JavaScript provides multiple ways to handle promises and the asynchronous operations. Callback being one of the oldest method where you can write a callback function, pass to the caller, and the caller can call back the function, means call that function whenever certain things happen. That's how asynchronous call used to be taken care in JavaScript, and the same been followed in NightwatchJS earlier version. But now with the version 3 and above, it is fully promise based, which means we can now use the modern JavaScript syntax like async await. If you have to understand this improvement with an analogy, think it in this way. Think it in the terms of traffic lights. You can either keep asking every second, is it green yet? Is it green yet? Or you can just await for the green signal and move on when it is ready. That's exactly what async await does for you on your browser commands. Now we are going to see how we can turn our test into asynchronous test and use the async await command from JavaScript to take advantage of them. So let's go to the code editor, in our case is VS Code, and start writing some of this code. So I have the Nightwatch.js tutorial code repository cloned over here. In case you are new to this playlist and you are seeing this video right now, all the code that we have mentioned in this playlist in the earlier videos are there in this repository called NightwatchJS-tutorial. The link to this repository is in the description of this video. You can find it. And you can also find different branches where we have placed the code for the individual video. As today is with async await, once the video is published, once you start watching it, you should be able to see a new branch called async await where you'll be seeing the code that I'm going to put today. So let's go to VS Code once again. Under the test folder, let us right click and create a new test file called asyncdemo.test.js. As usual, let us start with the describe. We have learned all this thing in the previous sessions, like what is describe, what is it, and etc. Now over here, inside describe, I am going to write my first test. Okay. And if you notice over here, this is a callback function. There is nothing async await here. This is a pure callback function. Now when we used to write our test, we write our test using it. Over here, we explain what the test is supposed to do. For example, it should search for a product and validate results. And over here, we used to do a callback function, right? This is how we used to write our test. Now, what we're going to do, we are going to leverage async await keywords so that we'll make sure that it handles promise correctly. Now, to use async, you just use the async keyword in front of the function. Then it becomes an async function. Now, inside this async function, now I have to do multiple things. For example, I will receive a browser object. Taking the browser object, I will hit this URL, our e-commerce playground. Then I can wait for some time for the search element to be visible. Then I can set some value on that search text, say iPhone, because I'm going to search on it. We have written a test like this multiple times before, right? And then we can simulate a click event on the search button. This is the click event on the search button. Then we can wait for the product list to come up. This is the product thumb, and then we can write an assertion to check that each of the product has iPhone in it or not. Now all these operations we have put sequentially to happen. As this is an async function and all these operations are listed inside an async function, we can mark and await in front of it. This is going to be awaited here. All these things are going to get executed, and only then it is going to the next set of instruction to execute. Before, there was no guarantee because we were not handling in the async await way. So if there is an asynchronous mechanism or asynchronous thing being handled over here, previously there was no guarantee that it will wait for the completion of it for handling the promise before it goes to the next set of instruction. Now there is a guarantee because of this await keyword. To use the await keyword inside a function, the function has to be an asynchronous function. That's exactly we have done over here. Now, as usual, you can come to command prompt, you can write this command npx nightwatch test-async.demo.test.js. What it is going to do, it is going to run this particular test on the browser that we have configured. We have seen this ample time, this running part. That's not the important part over here. The important part is to understand what is an async function do, what is an await keyword does, and why we have used async await over here. Just remember, the await keyword ensures that each command finishes before the next one starts. No callback hell in this case, no chaining of promises in this case. It's just a clean linear flow is what we are talking about. Some Nightwatch.js commands return values such as get text, get attributes. Now these values are not plain values. These values are promises, JavaScript promises. So once you get JavaScript promises, you need to handle the promise to get the data out of it, or if there is an error, get the error out of it. Now to handle promises, there are mechanisms like you can use the handler functions like .then, .catch, etc. And you make your code very verbose. But right now with the modern JavaScript, we have async await. We have discussed that already. So now let us see that if you get this async results in terms of promises using .get text, .get attribute, how can you use the fundamentals of async await to handle those async results? Let's create a new test file called getText.js. As usual, let us get started with the describe. So we are demonstrating the get text example and handling is results. So here I have this function. Inside the function, just like before, we will have a test with it, and my test is about should fetch product name using await, and over here we have already learned this that we'll use the async function, and inside async function now we'll have bunch of awaits. In the previous example we just had one async one await, but now we'll be doing bunch of awaits. So for example, the first await is once we have the browser object, use the browser object and get this URL. Then the next await is use the browser object, wait for this particular element input field whose name is search to be visible, then set a value into the search field called MacBook, and then simulate a click event on that particular search button which is beside the search field, right? So this particular statement will be executed only when a guaranteed way this statement has been executed. Now anything we put after this, for example, if I want to wait for an element to be visible, which is like a anchor tag inside a h4, which is inside a div having a class called product thumb, this will execute only when the first two execution is completely done. Now we are getting into the product name. How do we get the product name? The syntax for this we are already aware, browser.getText. Now this returns a promise. Whenever something returns a promise, to handle that you need an await. And before only we have learned we can use await only inside a function that has an async keyword. That's the JavaScript rule. Now once we use the await, the promise that getText returns will be resolved and we'll get the actual value. If we don't use this await here, this getText returns a promise that you have to handle it. For handling it, you can use .then, .catch, all these things. We don't want to get into all that. So for that, we will simply use await, which will return me the actual value, and we'll take it inside a variable called product name, and that's it. After that, I can possibly do a console.log with this product name, or I can write a further assertion saying, okay, if it is include something called MacBook, otherwise, find it as a negative test case. So you're seeing how async await making things simplified. My code syntax, everything is much more simpler now. At the same time, I'm handling the JavaScript promises in my Nightwatch.js much more elegantly. There is no callbacks, there is no .then, .catch chaining, just pure JavaScript flow. One thing I would like to mention though, whenever you are using async await, often developers or the automation testers, they forget to handle the error scenario. You must handle the error scenario. To handle the error scenario is pretty easy. Just put your entire code inside this try block like this. Put this entire code inside this try block and then write a catch using an error object and write a catch block. So if there is an error, any kind of error happen within this, let's say this URL is not valid or something happened, you handle that error inside this catch block. Coming here, you can minimally do console.error.message so that it at least prints the error message on the console, or you can probably show this error somewhere, you log it in some other file, whatever you want to do with this error, you can do it. You feel free to do this. So just wanted to point it out, like this error handling scenario is something that you should never miss out. Okay, this is good. But here is a tricky part. What if you have to handle these asynchronous aspects with the page objects? In the last video, we have learned about the page objects. Can we see page objects and asynchronous calls using async await together? Async await becomes even more powerful when you use it inside page object methods. To create a page object, we can go inside this Nightwatch folder and then there will be a page objects folder. By the way, in the last session, I have gone much deeper into page objects, why we use it, how to create it, what are the benefits and everything. So in case you missed that video, please take a look into that. It's very, very important. Now in this video, I'm going to touch base quickly on how we can use async await within the page object. So for that purpose, inside page objects folder, let's create a new file called 𝐓𝐚𝐻𝐸.js. Our page object looks like this. Here we have defined the elements, search input and the search button. And we have a page object method called search product, which takes a product. And after taking the product, it sets the value of the product in the search input. And then it click the search button. Very, very usual thing. Now here, this search product function, which is also our page object command, we have marked as async. And here we have marked as await. Why this is useful? Because if you are going to use functions like get attributes, get text, etc., we just now mentioned that those functions returns a promise that you have to resolve to get the actual value. Now, if you want to use such functions within your command function, you have to handle asynchronous call. If you have to handle asynchronous call, either you have to go in the handler function way just by using .then, .catch, etc., or use the async await way just now we have learned, so that your code commands become very clean, it's elegant, it's modern. Now, this gives us the page object. We can always use this page object saying that browser.page.homepage, that's the name of this page object file. So browser.page.homepage is going to give me the home page. Then I can call homepage.navigate.search by passing a product name. Right? We have seen how page objects works in the last video. Please go back and look into it. But here we have just extended it using the async await keyword to ensure that you can use the promise resolve values inside your command function in the page object. That makes your page objects quite elegant. I hope you like that. Now let us talk about what can go wrong and how we can fix it. Some of the common mistakes. Do you know what is the mistake here? Just take a look into this code. The mistake over here is we have not used the await keyword. Sometimes we by mistake forget to mention the await keyword. And if you forget to mention an await keyword on things like this assertion where we're saying text contains, this might cause certain false positive. So how are you going to fix this one? You are going to fix this one by putting an await in front of it, putting an await in front of it. And wherever these two lines are, most probably it will be inside a function. Make sure that you use async keyword in front of that function, because if you have used await keyword inside a function, the function has to be an async function. So the first mistake we often encounter is missing the await keyword. The second mistake that we do is using the pause function instead of waiting. Pause function gives a momentary pause. That is not about handling the asynchronous calls. Asynchronous calls means you have make a request, you make a call, then you proceed with your things as you were doing before. Whenever the call comes back with a success and result, then you start handling it. You don't always poke for it, you don't always poll for it, like what exactly happened to my call, right? That's the difference between a synchronous call and the asynchronous call. The pause method is something which is like very temporary medicine, I would say, that developers often use to pause certain execution, while they actually have to await, or they have to really wait and handle the promise elegantly. So be smart by using the await keyword. Don't use the dot pause unnecessarily, where you have to await and you have to handle the promise resolved value. Please remember, wherever you deal with the promise resolved value, wherever you have get text, get attributes, text contains, all these things you are using which returns a promise instead of a value, you cannot give pause. You have to use the await keyword. So these two mistakes I wanted to call out while using async await. Please be mindful about them. After common mistakes, let's talk about some of the best practices. Some of the best practices that I follow: always mark test function as async. I always start with it because if I mark the test function as async, I'm sure like I can use await inside that function, and I can use await freely without the tension that, oh, I will be missing the await or not missing the await. Because if you don't use the async for the function and sometime you want to use await inside the function, you're going to get an error. So use async always for your test function. Then second, for nightwatch commands, please use await because most of these commands returns a promise that you have to resolve, and for resolving you have to use await. So always await nightwatch commands. Then as I told in the command mistakes, don't use pause. Use smart waits. For example, wait for element visible is much better option than using a pause. Okay, so make sure that you use smart waits like wait for elements visible instead of pause. Whenever you use page objects, now you know that you can use async await inside that. So it means that you can reuse asynchronous logic inside the page objects. Please do that. And last but not the least, though not related to this particular session, make sure you always end the browser session gracefully using the browser.end function. So these are some of the best practices I follow. I would love if you follow them as well. So that's all about the sixth video where we have discussed about the asynchronous test, how to handle async test with Nightwatch.js. We have two more videos to go in this playlist. The seventh one is going to be about the multiple browser test. This is where we are again going to go back to the Lambda test to show how we can run on multiple browsers locally and also on a cloud based environment like Lambda test. And then the final video which will be about debugging. Thank you for watching. If you have any question or feedback, please write them on support@lambdatest.com or go to www.lambdatest.com. If you want to learn more, follow us at www.lambdatest.com/blog. There are plenty of articles out there. If you want to join our community, go to community.lambdatest.com. And if you want to achieve Lambda test certification and want to get recognized on your resume, please go to www.lambdatest.com/certifications where you can get educated, can get recognized. All right. So we'll be back again with the seventh session very soon. Thank you.